Today's guest is a classically trained chef whose roots run deep in the European tradition of discipline, precision, and respect for craft. Originally trained in Switzerland, Chef Roland Glauser has spent decades leading kitchens, mentoring young cooks, and carrying forward the fundamentals that shape great chefs. Long before trends enter the room, in this episode, we talk about technique, leadership, and the responsibility that comes with running a kitchen in a constantly changing industry. I'm your host, Richard Julien, and this is the Backstage Kitchen podcast. Let's talk about some new openings. As we head into the colder months, it's always good to take a moment and recognize the people brave enough to open doors or to reopen them in the industry. Here's a quick snapshot of some new restaurant openings and relaunches around Halifax this fall. In September, Via Condati, downtown Halifax, on Queen Street, actually, is a new Italian concept from the Bertozzi Group. It opened around mid-September, finding a refined European approach with Italian classics. And that's, again, like I said, on Queen Street in Halifax. In October, Little Pizza in downtown Dartmouth, a neighborhood pizzeria and Italian spot that quietly opened on Portland Street. It's getting the local buzz. Wow, Portland Street is really getting busy. It's crazy. I didn't think we had any room for any more restaurants. And in November, Quesada, a Mexican chain, opened up in Sunnyside Mall, another quick service option in Bedford, expanding the mall's casual dining lineup. Fay's Turkish cuisine on Spring Garden Route is making splashes. A relaunch and return to the downtown core, bringing classic Turkish dishes back to Halifax. Rosie's Burgers near Pizza Corner, a new burger joint opening in late November, adding to the late-night melee of comfort food mixed downtown. And Edo Japan at the Halifax Shopping Center, a new addition to the food court, offering Japanese-inspired fast casual. And in December, I'm not sure if they've opened or not, but Marigold Kitchen on Barrington Street announced in early December, and that should be open hopefully soon. I know I saw in Halifax Retails as of December 3rd that it was opening up. So, hey, opening a restaurant or relaunching one is never really easy, especially in this climate in Halifax where they open and close so quickly. So if you're looking for somewhere new to eat, consider checking out one of these spots. First weeks matter more than people realize, and supporting new openings helps keep Halifax food scene moving forward. Especially going into this time of year, December is definitely make or break for a lot of restaurants because that 2 weeks in January is bitterly cold, both figuratively and literally. Before we get into today's conversation, let's take a moment for a few culinary birthdays worth noting this week. December always brings out some big names in the food world. Bobby Flay celebrated on December 10th. He's one of the most recognizable American chefs in the last 3 decades, and a huge part of how food television evolved. On December 17th, happy birthday to Duff Goldman, pastry chef, artist, and the creative force behind Ace of Cakes, someone who helped show the world that baking can be architectural, playful, and wildly imaginative. But the most significant birthday around this time belongs to one of the true giants of our industry. On December 18th, today, Chef Jacques Pepin turns 90 years old. Born in France in 1935, Chef's career reads like culinary history itself. From cooking for President Charles de Gaulle to shaping American food culture after moving to the United States in 1959, he worked in some of New York's great French kitchens. Turned down a role cooking at the White House for none other than President Kennedy, and instead chose to help modernize American dining through his work with the Howard Johnson's franchise. Over the years, he became one of the most important culinary educators of our time, authoring more than 30 cookbooks, writing for publications like the New York Times and Food and Wine, and teaching generations of cooks that technique, humility, and generosity belong together. Many of us welcome him into our homes through television, especially his unforgettable partnership with the one and only Julia Child on the Emmy-winning Julia and Jacques Cooking at Home, a friendship that embodied mentorship, curiosity, and a true joy of cooking. To honor his 90th birthday, the Jacques Pepin Foundation launched a year-long 90-90 campaign throughout 2025. 90 dinners across the country celebrating 90 years of life and influence. Top chefs and restaurants hosted Pepin-inspired dinners, home cooks joined in, virtual events brought the community together, all in support of the Foundation's mission, providing culinary education and life skills training to individuals facing employment barriers. I invite you to learn more about this celebration at celebratejacques.org. That European lineage, where technique is respected and standards are protected and cooks are built over time, leads us straight into today's conversation. My guest is a classically trained chef whose roots run deep in the same tradition. Originally trained in Switzerland, Chef Roland Glauser has spent decades leading kitchens, mentoring young cooks, and upholding the fundamentals that turn good food into great cooking. In this episode, we'll talk about technique, leadership, and the responsibility that comes with running a kitchen in a constantly changing industry. I have a special guest with me on the Backstage Kitchen podcast. I have Chef Roland Glauser, or as some of my friends call him, Chef Roly or Roland. And as you like to be called, Roland, because I've called you chef a few times. And it's funny, as a young apprentice, that's what I go to when I talk to someone who's been in the business longer. But I guess now that I've been in for a few years, I feel I can call you Roland. So thanks for coming on the show. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, I'm not that big of a fan of being, and I never was, to be called Chef Roland. I don't know.
Yeah.
I I never really did that, and I might find folks to call me Rolly or
Yeah. No, I'm not comfortable with it either because, I'm Richard. Chef isn't what identifies who I am. Some people they do, and that's fine. The only time I ever ask for it is if clients are hiring me as the chef, and it's not an ego thing.
Mhm.
They want to brand themselves with a chef, and that's fine. In my oh gosh, I got into kitchens in 1988. I've seen a lot and done a lot, and I'm still not comfortable with the chef thing. And I'm an apprentice and a learner too. So, anyways,
It's a
welcome
little
to the
too
show.
close. It's a little too close to military style talk.
Yeah, I get it. No, 100%. It's which is interesting. I just finished up 6 years working for the military, not as a military cook, but as a civilian for the D&D, but I worked alongside military cooks. So I have a whole lot of insight in that too. But I guess the first thing I want to do is welcome you. Those of you who don't know Roland, he's been a mainstay in Nova Scotia for goodness, probably over 30 years now, hasn't it, Chef?
Since 1985,
Wow.
I immigrated to Nova Scotia.
Mm-hmm.
I started out in Halifax,
Yes.
so I guess the whole thing started in '83. I was hired to be a chef in Jasper Park Lodge, Alberta.
Oh yeah.
And that's where I met my wife. And then we went back to Switzerland for the winter, then went back to Jasper again. And we felt that, unless we get married, that's not going to work out too well, to go back and forth and stuff.
Of
So we
course.
decided to get married, went back to Switzerland again for a half a year. And then I got my immigration and Kathleen got her Swiss passport. And we then settled in 1985 in Halifax.
Mm-hmm.
And I was at Sheraton, which is now the Marriott, I think.
Yeah, it was very new then, wasn't it? It
Yeah.
was brand new, wasn't
It
it?
was brand new, yeah. So I was the restaurant chef for 6 months, and then I was a
Okay.
sous chef for a year and a half, and then the last year and a half or so, I was the executive chef, and that was a pretty brutal job because I was only, like, 23 years old,
That's a lot to
and
take on.
my English wasn't exactly great yet, so it was kind of anyway, it was glad to get out of there for sure. Then I went to the Inland Lake for 6 and a
Mm,
half years. That was really
yeah.
good.
That's funny, I live just down the road from that now. I'm in Fall River, so I see it every
Yeah.
day.
Yeah, and then since 1995, we're living in Shelburne,
Mm,
and we up till 4 years ago we owned and operated a restaurant here, and then we're able to sell it and retire,
that's
and
great.
we still live right beside the restaurant,
Okay,
which
nice.
is kind
Well,
of
yeah.
weird.
Yeah. So the new owners carried it on, have they changed the name, or is it
No,
still
they
Charlotte
bought
Lane?
they bought they bought the name and everything, and I gave them all the recipes we had for the last decades, and
Wow.
but they really only in the beginning did a few little things, what we
Mhm,
did,
mhm.
and they totally changed everything. And the chefy guy, he's from India, so it's lots
Okay.
of, Indian, Asian
Yeah,
stuff.
his culture food for sure. Yeah, his comfort food. Well, it's nice to have a consultant right next door, especially when you're opening up, or sorry, taking over a restaurant. So that's got to be helpful just for little things like suppliers and what have you, and little things like that. I mean, it's a lot of work people don't realize.
they're not really asking very many questions, that's for
No,
sure,
they're just doing. Well, hey,
which is quite okay with me.
that's great 'cause then you've accomplished your goal. You've moved on and doing other things, and I know you do quite a bit of traveling too. Back to when you first came to, Nova Scotia, we'll talk about the travel in a bit, but, you had, spent some time at the Sheraton, as we already discussed, and it's interesting, a lot of chefs came out of the Sheraton, like Stefan Zappole,
Mhm,
yourself, guy named
mhm.
you ever work with a guy named Gary Speck? I think Gary was there for a
Oh,
little
yes,
while.
yes.
But
Yeah.
so these people I've bumped in over the years, so it was interesting. For modern cuisine in Nova Scotia, I always use the timeline of, well, Alex Clabel, of course, who
Yes,
who
yeah,
was a mainstay and brought,
yeah.
European style cooking to Nova Scotia. But, the Sheraton too, because it was such a big property, it brought a lot of eager young chefs that sort of cut their teeth on
Mhm.
it. And, running a kitchen at 23, it's difficult. I was a sous
It's
chef
crazy.
at a place. I was only the sous chef, but the chef left, so I was running at 25 years old. I didn't know how to be a person yet, but yet I was trying to run. The time I was there, I was stressed all the time. I didn't like it. I learned a lot, but at the time I didn't appreciate it. It was like afterwards, I was like, all right, you learn more through adverse conditions than you do when things are going right, I guess, to quote a cheesy phrase. But yeah, I can relate to that. You had a great stay at the Inn on the Lake because it's a smaller, more boutique kind of style property. Did you have free reign to do what you wanted there? How was it? What did you bring
So,
to Fall River?
yeah, so the Inner Lake, when I started, I think the owners then had just bought it like 2 years before,
Okay.
and they were very good friends with the Risley's,
Oh,
the
yes.
restaurant.
Yep.
So he helped them a bit to start, and then the first chef left, and then
Mhm.
I came up,
Mhm.
and, somehow I really clicked with them because they went through a lot of chefs after I
Yeah.
left.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was like the new world record for sure. Anyway,
You were.
so somehow I connected really well with them, and they didn't really piss me off too much, and and always discussing what they wanted to do, and sometimes they had crazy ideas, and I just kind of ignored them for a while, and then they forgot them too, and so it was good. It was really good. They really, and it was nice to be part of to get this hotel, which was kind of, I think they used to rent the rooms by the hour, and it was
Yeah.
like a, it was kind of like a Hell's Angels bar. I don't know, rock
Yeah.
bar.
It had a seedy pass before
Yeah. So
Sue, I
it was
think, and her
nice.
husband.
It was nice to see, their vision, when we first met, and actually they actually went through it, and upgraded all the rooms, and the restaurant was newly designed, and the whole outdoors. So it was nice to be part of that, and it seemed to go really well. And then after 6.5 years, I was kind of ready to do something else. At the same time, my wife was working for Canadian Airline, and she her job was stopped here, and we could have moved out west, but we didn't really want to move, so she just took a severance package. And then we started to look for a restaurant for about, well, like 4 or 5 months. Every days off, we went down the South Shore and the Eastern Shore, and to look at everything from B&Bs to restaurants to God knows what.
Yes.
Yeah. So it took us about 6 months to find something.
Yeah, I remember I was still, I think, a young apprentice when that happened, and what was interesting too is you guys went down to Shelburne just as sort of the movie business was making a break in Nova Scotia. They filmed a Demi Moore movie. Were you guys established when that happened? Did that give you a good leap, or a good jump start down there? Did you get any business from the movies being shot on the South Shore in Shelburne?
So the movie was actually filmed in 94, and we
Right,
started in 95. So there was nothing, I mean, there was still lots of
right,
sets set up, but the movie was
mm,
long gone.
right.
But I'm sure it helped to, put the name in on the map for people to come and visit the town. So it brought in some more traffic, but the whole movie thing was gone. But then
Yeah,
over
that
the years, we had probably another 3, 4 different movies who came here, and that was
mm,
always excellent, excellent for business. And like Shelburne is a, when we first started, we were pretty exotic for
mm.
compared to the rest of the restaurants, and so they were quite happy to have something, little, you know
No, definitely.
upper crust.
Yeah, no, I get it. More discipline, European cuisine, of course. That's like Shelburne did become kind of a bit of a touristy area. I know myself. I even went down to visit the sets that were there afterwards because of the
Hmm.
movie. It was really exciting. for Nova Scotia in the 90s. We look at how food is developed, and you've been here the whole time. I don't know, it sounds flaky, but it was almost the start of a renaissance in Nova Scotia as far as good quality food. We had
Hmm.
yourself, we had Chef Stephen Houston, Alice Clavel had trained a lot of people. We had Dale Nichols from who was at the Delta. It was a really exciting time to be a young apprentice in Nova Scotia because we had mentors, I think, in Nova Scotia, unlike what we had before. And I can only speculate on that because, like I said, my time in kitchens as an apprentice were mainly in the late 80s, early 90s. So yeah, it was an exciting time. And you were actually one of the first chefs to sort of branch out of Halifax and make a name for themselves, you and your wife,
Hmm.
by doing that, and you see that more and more now. I had Chef Dave Smart on the show earlier, and
Hmm.
he and his wife have a little spot. He does seatings Thursday, Friday, Saturdays for 12, and he's found his niche, and he seems to be doing
Yes.
well. And I think a lot of chefs are sort of going away from the whole big brigade system and saying, you know what, I want to have a little more quality with my life.
Hmm.
Not that you
Yeah.
don't work big days, but you find that happening more and more as life
Yeah.
goes on with other chefs.
And that, for us was too, the decision to go to Shelburne was that, I mean, if you open a restaurant in Halifax, you have to be open 7 days a week,
Yes,
every day. Otherwise,
yes,
they'll just forget about you because there's so much competition. But when we went
absolutely.
into Shelburne, we always had the plan that we're going to be closed in the winter.
Right.
And it was not a problem. People, as soon as we made an announcement we were opening it, they were all like lining up.
Mhm,
And so it was really not a problem to just shut down for 4 months, and they wouldn't forget about you. And of course, financially too, because properties obviously are less expensive down here. So
mhm.
for us, that was a great thing to do.
But yeah, no, definitely. That's the dream, I think. That's the dream. That's why, like, right now I'm doing catering and I've started the podcast as sort of a hobby. Where that goes, I don't know, but I've always enjoyed chatting with chefs and musicians. And
Hmm.
so far, it's been great. I've had a great response. It's been a lot of fun. So, could you? So, we were kind of talking to the listeners about, your time in Nova Scotia. We talked a little bit about the 90s. What got you into kitchens, Roland? Like, where did that genesis? Everyone has a starting story, and could you
Well, I
tell me a
got
little
one, all
bit
right.
about that? Yeah, you got thrown right in, did you?
Well, let me tell you. So I have two older brothers and a
Mhm,
sister and a half sister, and also a grandfather, my father's father, my grandfather. He
mhm.
was a chef. My mother's mom, she worked commercially, and then both my older brothers are chefs. And actually the middle one, he basically did the apprenticeship 3 years before me, and I went to the same
Okay.
hotels and just followed
Wow,
him. And they're all saying,
amazing.
"Oh no, not another Glauser coming! Oh my god!" Anyway, so
You had a
and
reputation before you got there.
oh, yes, I had to work hard to change that whole image of the Glausers. And then, but really, I think it's sort of grade 2, grade 3, teacher or people would start us. So, what do you want to be when you grow up? And
Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I always said chef,
Wow, that's
always.
cool.
I never thought about anything else. And then, I did a couple of kind of like job shadowing events, 3 weeks here, 3 weeks there, and loved it. And just visiting my brothers in their kitchens and smells so
Yeah,
good. And they gave you stuff to try, and I was
of course.
totally, totally in love. And then there was no food TV, food networks yet to entice you. I just saw it from my brothers,
Yeah,
and they both said, you should try something different, because I think I did quite well in school. And this, yeah, you should maybe, I don't know, go to university or whatever, and oh no,
yeah.
no way.
You knew. Well, that's pretty cool.
Yep. So I
I
right away,
so you it was kind of like you looked up to your brothers, and that's very common in families. And you were
yeah.
like, "I want to do this," and you had the opportunity to see kitchens. I think that's good because a lot of people today, and you would kind of hinted on it before the Food Network, even culinary instructors like Claude Coyne, who's one of the chefs at the
Hmm.
NSCC. He's like, you have some students coming in because they see the Food Network and they're like, "I
Hmm.
want to do that." But,
Hmm.
that's you have a better chance of getting hit by lightning, really, I
Hmm.
think, than
Yes.
than to do that. And the money's not always great, and, your producers and your production is gonna get paid long before you do. So, it's interesting that it has kinda come full circle, and you don't see a lot of that, at least maybe not in Europe, but in North America, it's like that. So, can you tell me
Mhm.
just a little bit about your apprenticeship and how it works there? It's very different than the North
Yeah.
America system where you go to school sometimes and then move on.
But it depends. It depended when if you signed up with like a seasonal hotel, which
Mhm.
I did,
Right.
and at that time there were lots of hotels. They were only open in the winter. They just closed the rest of the year. Which I think that's no longer the case. Most
Okay.
hotels are open all year round. Anyway, so at that point, I started the apprenticeship in a sort of like a summery resort town, like about a half an hour away where I grew up. And so I was there full time in the kitchen and all hands on learning. It was like total, like the chef had like, a 10-foot hat and like definitely yes, chef. And we had to speak French with him and all of that
Yes.
stuff. And then in the
Wow.
fall, when the hotel closed, I went to a hotel type school and had full immersed theoretical and some practical too schooling. And then in the winter, I went to a ski resort and I did the same thing again. And if you went to a place which was open all year round, once a week you would go to a school, and it would be like kind of like a community college type school, and you
Yeah.
would get math and business and language and theoretical culinary
Mm.
stuff, and then the other 4 days you would go and work in the restaurant or kitchen hotel you signed up. And it took it was a 3-year program.
Mhm.
For me, for example, I lived in the hotel, so I had room and board, and they paid me. The first year was like 150 Swiss francs, which nowadays like maybe 250 Canadian a month. That was
Right, right.
our beer money. And then
Right.
the second year, I think it was like 300, and the fourth year was like 450 or something. Anyway, so but it was good. So there was always a room and board, and the hotel I did in Interlaken was a big, huge, old classical hotel, and we had like all these classical departments, and so when I was like in the pastry department, actually we did everything, like from blowing sugar to fancy cakes to desserts and everything in the butcher. We had half animals coming in, and so we really got detailed training. But it was
Yeah,
like really tough. I mean, the chef was like we were all shaking our boots from the chef. He just had to look at you, and you were like, "Oh yeah, chef."
yes, chef. Oh, yeah, yeah. No, it's it's interesting. You don't see that as much anymore, especially not in
No,
North America, the whole
no,
brigade system, and the
yeah,
chefs were feared and is it safe to say they were almost like a father figure? Is that true? Like, I
yeah,
always compare it to that,
yeah,
almost like or a mother figure if it's a female, but it was more
yeah.
common, especially in European chefs in that time. It was definitely a lot more male-centric, which has
I
changed.
think the only thing I find sort of in North America is that like in Europe, I mean, I don't exactly know how it is right now, but when I worked
Mm,
there for even after apprenticeship, like we were like all like well dressed, like all
mm.
like beautiful
Yes.
uniforms,
Yes,
nice
pressed,
hat,
ready to go. Mhm.
and like there was a very structure kind of a thing. Where I find
Yes.
here sometimes it's a little more like gangster and
Mhm. Yep. No, it's changed a lot.
it's just kind of like peace out, brother, and
No, it's
uh,
true, it's true. Every culture, every generation seems to embrace culinary in its own way, and, I grew up, at least, in the '90s in a hotel environment, and in a hotel environment, it is, like you just said, a little more dressed up, I wore my checkers or my black pants,
mhm,
my chef's jacket, I had to have a necktie, you know? My apron had to be clean, especially if I was out in front doing a station, and I had the hat. It wasn't as tall as the chef's, but I had my, a hat and the different levels and heights of the hat depended on your rank in the kitchen. You don't see that anymore. You see,
no,
I think you see chefs kind of more akin to rock stars, a lot of these cooks. But, the balance of that is a lot of chefs too, and I'm not being critical of the new generation. I have met some people that are cracker jack and really good, but the foundation of classic cooking is sometimes missed. Like, you can make a beautiful plate and put it on Instagram, but can you make pâté choux? Can you make puff pastry? And I think a lot, and I came up in that too. I almost had to backtrack after I got my red seal to learn how to do those things because
mhm.
it was almost like there was this transition, it was getting missed. So, do you still see that? I mean, you're not running your kitchen anymore, but the
No,
convenience factor of it has
I think
changed.
you're totally right. I think
Yeah.
that you need a really good foundation. So when you go to somebody else's kitchen and the head honcho tells you, well, kind of brunoise, you don't have to go like,
Yeah.
what the hell is that?
What is
And
that,
so
right?
like basic things are a lingo you don't have to start from scratch, where,
Mhm,
it just seems to be just not really happening that people have this basic training and to, like as you said, like make patashu and all this stuff. And even if you're not going to serve it, but it's like these are kind of basic things which really help you to have a good foundation. And you can actually, you have the same language if you talk with somebody else who has the same background.
mhm, mhm,
And I found too, I mean, Switzerland, if I said I was a chef, that
mm,
was, oh, wow, cool,
yes,
excellent.
yes.
When I first came over to Nova Scotia, I remember I was in a party with my father-in-law and I said I was a chef. Okay. Next.
It didn't have the same well, that's
It was
the
like,
whole
oh, you couldn't do anything else.
yeah, I know. Well, that's like, the whole hospitality industry in
Hmm.
North America, if you're in front of the house has it too. If you're a professional server over the age of 25 and not in university, people are like, "Oh, you're unemployable," which is
Yeah,
not, which is furthest from the truth. And
yeah.
and same with cooking. I also think that in North America, we've dumbed down a little bit about what calling a chef is really about. And again, I get it. Chef, if you look at it in loose terms, is the leader of that kitchen, but I would have a hard time calling myself a chef if 90% of my product came out of a freezer
Hmm.
prefab and I dropped it in a deep fryer. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah. Yeah.
a chef should have special meaning, and I think a chef should be able to handle themselves multidisciplinary in different, should be able to do the banquet service, should be able to do the à la minute, the à la carte, and that I think was deleted in North America from the beginning compared to Europe. And that's the culture, that's the difference I see.
Plus also part being a chef, you also have to be able to be how to deal with people.
Yes.
Not just, how to grill a steak and or whatever, but you also like, people management and all that stuff and how to, can't just be like ripping into people and there's no wonder nobody wants to work in the industry. So it's all that kind of stuff too. Plus, you have to know math, you have to figure out
Yep.
when you're going to make money or it's not just stirring the pot. There's lots of things which make a chef and not just, the spoon in your hand and all that stuff.
I agree, and that is often lacking. It's getting better. I keep tabs on the different schools, at least in Canada, and what they're
Hmm.
teaching, and I think they're trying to teach a little more about culinary management.
Yeah.
And it helps, but really, at the end of the day, my generation, if we took a course, that's fine, but then we learned on the job. Sometimes there's confusion. If you take a management job or management course, doesn't necessarily mean you're a manager yet,
No.
but you have the foundation. It's about trial and error and finding your own style. I've always joked around that kitchens are almost like pirate ships. There's a lot of characters, a lot of different people, and it's exhausting work kind of
Yeah.
wrangling everyone together because talented people sometimes are very eclectic, you know what I
Yes.
mean? And it's a lot of personalities to handle.
And I think you're totally right too. When you went to community college in whatever, in the 80s or 90s, I remember all the teachers were basically ex-military cooks.
Yes. Yes.
And but nowadays, you see like Eric Matouche was in Lunenburg and
Mhm.
Claude Aucoin and a whole bunch of like really well-known chefs in PEI and in Halifax too.
Hans Wicky's over there, I think.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah, I think he just retired too.
Good for him.
And so anyways, it used to be the teachers were just not really that experienced to teach you a whole lot. Where it's much better now, and I think maybe they just
I
pay
agree. I agree.
teachers better too, and it's a good career.
Well, it speaks to what you said earlier too about cooking being sort of a throwaway job because it even spoke in our apprenticeship program at the time. It was very, meat and potatoes. I remember doing my first block after I went through culinary school. So it's a little different in North America. Well, at least I went through the NSCC program. I did 2 years, and then we had to do blocks where you went to school for 6 weeks. You had practical and you also had your theory. And I learned more in my first 2 years at the NSCC because I had I had Bernard Grand Clement, who was classically trained. And I had Nick Cameron, who was Scottish, and he maneuvered his way with Bernard. But I found when I went to the other programs that it wasn't as much, but you're right, it has changed. We've got some fantastic, instructors in the NSCC program, and it's come a long way. And not only that, do you find that when well, especially like, I mean, you started out in the '80s. What did you learn from? Your mentors mainly. There was some books, some magazines, but for the most part, you learned from on the job in the kitchen. Now there is a plethora of ways to get information,
Hmm.
YouTube generation, online courses, all of those things. And it's really accelerated these, I'm not saying young particularly, but young and new cooks. Have you seen that change? I mean, you only retired a couple years ago, but so
Yeah,
you must have
4 years
seen it
ago. Yeah.
happening. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, did my apprenticeship, I mean, and I think it's still in Switzerland like that. There was one learning, I don't recall, learning book.
Okay.
And
Yes.
it's the Swiss cooking Bible,
Yes.
and everybody used that thing. The recipes may not have been totally the best, but I mean, it was exactly, if it said shoe paste, you
Yes.
know, it told you what it is, and everybody used the same Bible, F Bible.
Yes. Yes. No,
So I
we
think
had one in school too.
yeah, and I think maybe they're doing this here now as well, because I think many years ago I was invited to go to PEI, to the Culinary Institute, to help to put together curriculum. And I think
Okay.
maybe they're doing this now too. And I think in the beginning it was just whoever was the teacher came up with their own versions, and it was never really
Yes.
so
Yes.
uniform, you know?
And you're right, you do need uniformity, otherwise, the red seal means nothing because
Yeah,
then it's a different standard across the board. I've been lucky enough to have been the practicum one of the practicum judges. I mean, it's funny, you get different chefs have different opinions on it, and I would meet students that were just trying to get their red seal, and they worked at a long-term care facility, and they wanted to get the red seal for a bump up. I get that, and it's always been a conflict to me to go, "All right, is a red seal supposed to you're supposed to have a certain minimal amount of skills, and if you don't have that, you hate to disappoint people, but in a world where everyone seems to wanna validate everyone, you gotta have certain standards on it, you
yeah.
know? I'm harder on myself than anyone else, so I wasn't really good at being a judge. I wanted to pass everyone because I felt bad for them, but there were some chefs, there was some chefs who were like, "Oh, no, this, you can't, then blah, blah, blah." So, but anyways, it's an interesting thing. It's,
And there's many ways to go to Rome.
I agree. Yeah, yeah, 100%. 100, but I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot more from failure than I have from successes, but especially with my management style and stuff like that. So, anyways, I wanted to kind of slide into a couple of interview questions that I have to chat about your style of cooking, where you get that creativity. So, the first question I have
Or
is,
did.
or did. But I mean, yes, of course. What was your first spark that got your creativity cooking? Like when you're developing a menu, did you create new dishes or did you influence staples that you learned and made them your own? Like, what's that first spark that kind of gets things going?
Well, I mean, I guess in the beginning too, I guess I always was influenced because we, pretty much all our lives we were able to travel quite a bit. And so I was always definitely influenced where we would come back from a place. But it was also different. So to create something, say, like at the Sheraton or in a lake, would have
Mm,
been very different than what I would have done at the restaurant here.
of course, yeah.
Being that in our restaurant here, I was basically the only chef. And then I had two
Yes.
little helpers who do slice and dicing and give them recipes and they could figure out some things. But basically, I was the one having to come up with all the ideas, which was
Yes.
of 27 years. I was sometimes I was wishing I could just, shoot the breeze with somebody else or somebody else, bring something up. But I was really not able to do that much. So at the
I,
restaurant here, I had to think a lot about, because it was a very small kitchen.
mm,
And basically I did everything hot and a lot of
yeah.
cold stuff too myself during the
Yes.
service. So I had to really figure out dishes which were actually possible to produce for 50, 60 people a night. And so
Yes.
it was a combo of, okay, I'd love to do that, but that's not going to happen because I have certain limitations. And also, being in Shelburne, there's some limitations how much you really want to charge and all these things. So I was kind of influenced with all that, with me being on my own, where we are, and the size of the kitchen. So I was kind of influenced about these things for sure.
Yeah, that's you brought up something that I think every chef, agrees with is your kitchen and what you have to work with influences your menu 100%. If you have a bunch of ovens and no pan spaces, well, you probably should have some braised items or something that you
Yeah.
can, you know, but you have 10 burners, you're free to do a lot of things, right? It really does influence. It's funny. I opened up a place in Fairview called the Anchor, gosh, almost 10 years ago now, and we ran it for a couple of years. But yeah, the kitchen that we inherited had two burners, we had a flat top, we had an oven, and we had a couple of fryers. So yeah, we definitely had to influence.
Limitations.
Yeah, 100%. So and that's how your menu is influenced by that for sure. Okay, so what's the one thing that defines your style or flavor of food, that people may not notice every way? Like what like every chef has a signature, and not to sound cheesy or cliche, but obviously you're European trained. What is the one thing that you try to encapsulate into your dishes that people may not notice right away, but it's something that you after reflection go, "Oh yeah, that's part of my style."
Well, I mean, one of the things was too, I think we're well known of, I mean, most of our dishes were like to hit you over the head,
Yes.
powerful. And
Yes.
I was not shy with spices and salt
Yes.
and herbs and things. So they were
Yes.
always like, whoa, kind
Nice.
of a
It just
thing.
pops.
Yeah. And, sometimes people were shocked, and sometimes 99% of the time it was all good.
Yes.
And, but, like to combine, Asian spices with Western
Mm,
things and play around with
mm.
that. And of course, also, so depending where you live, like, we are like 100 meters from the ocean, influence of what you can do with not just, baked haddock, but what you can do with that. And so try to kind of combine things we experience on the road with local ingredients and make them go wild and wow.
Yeah, you were in a couple of chowder competitions over the years too, were you not? So
Yeah,
you
there was one, yeah, at the, what is it called? Saltscapes?
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, right.
that's cool. No, I remember seeing that actually, it was cool. It was quite a few chefs that went up there and did that, so it's
Yeah.
great.
I think
It shows our
last the last one I won, and I think was one
yeah.
the local brewery here is Boxing Rock, and I did like an IPA infused chowder with smoked fish and tarragon or something.
Yeah, that's aw you know what? I love tarragon on my chowder too.
Oh,
It gives
yes.
it a
Yep,
pop,
yep, yep.
absolutely. Yeah,
Oh,
and dill too, but I mean, tarragon's great. But, tarragon's one of those misunderstood French herbs, like, a lot of
yeah.
people are a little afraid of it because it's pretty intense if you use it
Oh,
in a
yes. Like
in
a
a
good sauce béarnaise is something fine.
100%. Listen, I agree. So when things get crazy in the kitchen, what's your style? How do you I already know the answer to this, but I'm gonna ask anyways because 'cause you're a very humble and kind and straightforward person, but you don't work with a lot of chefs when you had your restaurant, but how do you handle things when things go, a little intense?
So I guess the last 27 years, as I said, I was basically on my own, except,
Mm,
two kind of young kids. When I was in the doodle, way too many orders and stuff, I tend to totally get quiet.
right.
And I just know if I start yelling or because somebody pissed me off or something did something wrong, then I would just get too flustered and I would
Yep.
lose my train of thought or concentration of what I have to do.
Yes.
And also, because we're a tiny restaurant, basically when people came in, they poked their head in and said hi to me, and I know
Yeah,
everybody.
of course.
So I always felt I'm really like they all know I'm cooking, like, and they know
Yeah.
who I am. And so,
Yeah.
there's a whole other level of like I have to perform here,
Yeah,
and because
100%.
I won't be able to walk through the village.
It can't hold your head high if you yelled at someone.
So I just really when it got hot and steamy, I kind of got totally quiet, and I
Mm,
I I definitely I was never one to yell at
mhm.
all whatsoever, and, there was maybe once or twice afterwards I maybe, like, raised my voice a little bit, but nothing like you would see in Hell's Kitchen or whatever it's called.
I
All
know,
this
and that's what people
and
expect
everybody
sometimes.
all the staff knew if when Roland is quiet, you better stay away.
Yeah.
I
Well,
was
that's
well
fair.
known, well, just stay away.
I'd rather have a quiet chef than an angry chef
Oh,
anyways.
yeah. And I was found too, just seeing from other kitchens, when some of these chefs were going all ballistic, it really did not help. Like everybody was just like shaking and like wasn't
It throws
concentrated.
off the
And
whole vibe. I
and
agree.
and they're probably quitting the next day, and it
Yeah.
just, my opinion, just never worked. Sure, afterwards you can talk about it, but during a service to start yelling and throwing stuff is like,
It does nothing. It makes it worse. I agree. You're right. I've had to learn the hard way that way. And when I was a young chef, I was so insecure because I think I took on too much too soon.
mhm,
So that would come out because I hadn't matured. I hadn't tempered myself yet. So it came out the wrong way. But now, yeah, it's a little more. I'm a little more tempered. I mean, I have my moments, but it's just like you said, it throws me off. It makes
yeah,
service harder, and
yeah,
everyone else doesn't want to
yeah.
be there.
And it's one thing if you want to deal with it afterwards, but while you're in it, and you start yelling, and like really just does not help.
No, I agree.
You know, you just I mean, you yourself get all worked up, and you start to forget what the hell you're doing, and so I think it's not a good idea to start yelling. And yeah,
I
and
agree.
I always felt like, well, the people I hire, I mean, they should do okay things. Like I don't have to go and yell them, and they should just really they should be nice and should know stuff. It
Yeah, I
didn't always
agree. I
work out,
agree.
but
I agree. No, 100%. So, do you play music in your kitchen?
well, so during prep time, I used to listen to just the radio, really.
Okay.
Basically, in the morning, I would listen to CBC and stuff like that. And I felt that I didn't really want to necessarily play music because, the youngins beside me, I don't know if they want to listen to what I listen to. So I really did not, I mean, it's just sometimes, but I kind of did not do it because of, being careful with my other people. And
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
not that often. And especially, there's no way I could play music during service because
No.
I just
Yeah.
needed to be focused, and there was enough noise and things going on that I couldn't have like, rock and roll going on while I'm trying to, put 6 orders up or something. I just,
A lot of chefs feel that way.
I just could not. I don't think I could filter that kind of stuff. I just needed full concentration and
And communication
work.
too. I mean, you need to communicate with people. If your plate warmer is empty with plates, you need, more plates. If you need pans, if you need little things like that, you got to communicate. I agree. I've worked in different kitchens. One where they've played music, never usually during service, especially in fine dining.
Yeah,
Obviously, fine dining, you really got to focus on what you're doing. But I love, like you said, the radio on, or I work alone a lot too with my catering. So putting on, I sometimes listen to classical music, as
yeah,
cliche as
yeah,
that may sound,
yeah.
but I grew up in the 80s. I love hard rock. So I'll put on, some Queensryche or even Brian Adams or Phil Collins, any of that stuff.
Yes,
And kind of gets me in the vibe. Those are my funnest times is prep. I love prep probably
right.
better than service any day. I think a lot of
Yeah,
chefs think that way.
and if you do a good prep, you'll have a great service.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, if you were to collaborate with anyone, chef or musician, a living or deceased, who would that be, and what would you like to do with them?
You mean
Is
collaborate
this
like
like if you were to work with or cook for a chef or musician, like who's someone that you really idolize? It could be a chef because this is a chef. This is a music culture and kitchen culture show. If you could collaborate with anyone, whether it's a chef or musician, who would it be, and what would you create together?
well, we had the good fortune to. Have you heard of who Ferran Adria is?
Yeah,
Ferran, yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
he's the molecular dude.
El
Anyway, so
Bulli, I think.
what's that?
El Bulli, I think.
Yes, El
Was
Bui,
it?
which
Yeah, El
which
Bulli. Yeah.
which is not open. He shut it down. But so
Yes.
when he just first opened, we were happening to travel in Spain, and we found in some travel guides that restaurant said it was the best restaurant in Spain, and so we just drove there to see if we could make a reservation, and it was like their first day open for the season, and we somehow got
Wow.
a table, and that was when he, I think, maybe just had 2 Michelin stars. Anyway, so we
Mhm.
got in there and we had no idea who the hell he was. And
Yes.
it was just, mind blowing what he did. I mean, it was not maybe necessarily our best meal ever. I'm still doing maybe better, like some particular dish with the one sauce, which have more better memories. But with this guy, it was just, just like the playing around and like the ideas, what you can do, and like
Yes.
just totally crazy. So that would be kind of cool to really see because there were so many wild and wonderful things they prepared. And wow, how did they do this?
Can you think of one dish in particular that really wowed you?
Let's see. There was this. Well, actually, one of the courses was before they brought the dish to the table, they tied up balloons on our chair, and then they served the meal. And I forget exactly what it was. Something to do with oranges and something. And when they opened up the cover, they popped the balloon and they
Wow.
said, "Okay, we want you to think about you're in an orange orchard." And of course,
Wow.
they had filled the balloon with some sort of a orange essence, I
Yeah,
was like,
yeah, wow.
"Oh." So it's like the whole experience, not just like, the smell of the room and like, it was just, mind-blowing, like, how they come up with these ideas and stuff. Or, they had this little ball of something on the spoon, and you put it in your mouth, and it just exploded, and, all this molecular stuff, and it was quite amazing. But, one of the best meals, one of the best foods we ever had on the total other side of the side is we were in Lake Titicaca, which is in
Yeah,
Peru, and it's like
yeah.
4,000-meter altitude, and we were able to stay in a tiny little island called La Montagny, and we were just staying with a local family. Like, it was like the basic of the basics, like, we was sleeping on some straw bed, and they served this because there was no restaurants whatsoever. They served this fresh eggs and fresh tomatoes and fresh potatoes, and basically just boiled egg, boiled potatoes, and some fresh sliced tomatoes. And I still think back, was one of the best flavors ever.
It was
Like, it
probably
was like
pure flavor for
so
each ingredient.
simple, and but like, they grew it right there on this 4,000-meter altitude, and of course they're all specialized in potatoes, and it was incredible.
Honestly, Peruvian potatoes are definitely, like, one of those when I think of Peru, I think of Peruvian potatoes as one of
Yeah,
their
you
exports
pretty
that
much don't
chefs
need
really.
anything else.
No, it's amazing. Well, that's really cool because it speaks to the soil and how people grow. I know my first trip to Italy, before I went, being a typical cynical North American chef, thought, oh, well, of course they're going to sell to Italy, blah, blah, blah. But honestly, I had well, obviously the olive oil, but just even like a ripe tomato or a ripe melon, like the flavor pops so much better. And there's
Oh yeah,
such a respect for food ingredients in Europe by everyone. It's
man,
permeated into the daily life of most people. Whereas in North America, we get a little distracted by the fast food and stuff like
man.
that. But you
Plus,
find
most
that. So
most things come miles away because where we
yep,
live, and so
yep,
it's if you can go to a place where they actually grow everything right there, and it had to be harvested like 2 years ago
yes.
for it to arrive here in shape, and it definitely makes a big difference. But yeah, it's pretty amazing if you can go right to the source for sure.
No, that's true. That's true. So I'm just going to ask you one last, a couple of last questions as we wrap up here. What ingredient do you think is underrated or misunderstood?
We have, yeah, I don't know. I didn't really have a good answer for that.
No, that's fine. You know what? It's no, no, that's fine. It's kind of a trick question, but I
Yeah,
was just curious of what might have popped into your head. But
since your podcast is sort of like a music slash food
yeah,
thing, and we actually
yeah, yeah,
didn't
yeah.
talk about a lot about music. So I retired 4 years ago, and my wife was always big into music. She used to be part of a folk music duo called Naming the Twins, and then they went on tour for quite some time. And anyway, so her music partner passed away in 2019. So she kept going, and so she got more into choir type music.
Okay,
And so she joined a local choir, which was a really good, cool choir. And then that kind of ended. And so 2 years ago, her and a local guy uh, formed a community choir, and I then joined as well. So I'm now a choir boy, and
good
we
for
we
you.
love doing that, and we have a couple of performances a year. So I really gotten into singing again, and I hadn't done that till I was in school, and I really enjoy it. So, I mean, I'm not a really huge pro. I had to practice a lot, but
That's
like, we
okay,
both love doing that. So
and you do it together too,
yeah,
which is great. So do
kind
you
of
do you
cool.
sing in the kitchen? Did you sing in the kitchen as you were? Because I do that sometimes, but I'm usually alone. It doesn't hurt. That doesn't hurt anyone.
Yeah, not really that much. Maybe just under my breath, not necessarily
Mhm.
l- uh, out loud. Because if I do it, then Kathleen might hear some wrong notes.
Well, is she are you saying she's the expert in the music
She is
and you're the expert in
definitely
the cooking?
she is definitely the expert in the singing department, and I'm the one cooking most of the times.
And she plays
And
guitar too, doesn't
she
she? She
does,
plays
yes,
instruments?
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, that's really
and
cool.
yeah. So we both enjoy that very much, and she's definitely the pro in that department for sure.
Do you find there's a lot of similarities between cooking and the music culture? It's definitely like a creative outlet. Do you get the same satisfaction from going to choir and performing as you did in the kitchen? 'Cause there's
For
gotta be.
sure. I mean, for example, because I did retire 4 years ago, so I
Mm,
I
yeah,
must say I do not miss it being in the kitchen. I mean, I've done that for 45 years,
your whole
and
life, I know.
so I am really very happy that I'm not doing the restaurant thing anymore. And but I still enjoy cooking for us here or for friends and stuff like that. And it's just, and also, for many years when I was in Halifax, I was part of competitions like culinary team Nova Scotia and stuff. And I or just go to Saltscape and do some sort of a presentation in front of people. And quite happy. I don't need to do that anymore, and I don't know, prove myself because
Yeah,
it's nerve wracking and
it is.
stressful, and people know you, and you don't want to screw up. And so I'm kind of
Mhm.
happy to in the choir. We're like 40 people choir, and if I miss one note, I'm not going to get fired, or that they probably don't even know which one was the one who sang the one
You're blended in there, you're one it's like, being in a symphony or you're one note amongst many, but
exactly.
I can relate to what you're saying. I worked for both Sobeys and Loblaws at one point at the other. So I've taught hundreds of cooking classes, and people ask me, "Well, why aren't you doing that as part of your company?" I said, "I've done it. I've done hundreds of classes. It's not I'm not this isn't ego talking, but it's a chapter of my life that I've kind of put to bed, if you know what I mean. Like
Yeah.
you, I've been on Team Nova Scotia. I've done competitions, locally and nationally. And it really takes a toll on your emotional stress. So I'm glad not to do those anymore, but I'll still do cooking demos if
Hmm.
need be, like just to support a charity or stuff like that. But yeah, I'm happy to have kind of put that to bed. I never
Yeah.
say never. Doesn't
Yeah.
mean I'm not ever going to do it again,
Yeah.
but I don't consider it as part of, what I do anymore.
Yeah.
And
Like, for example, I'm part of the local yacht club here, and they
mhm.
always look for somebody to put on a dinner Friday nights. And
Mm,
sometimes they
yeah,
caterers, and sometimes
yeah,
just members cook. So they've been asking me for the last 4 years to make a Charlotte Lane meal,
right,
and
yeah.
I was, oh my God, I don't really want to do it. Like, I was really kind of like stressed out, and so they got sucked me in like about 3 weeks ago, and so I did a dinner for them, and I felt slightly stressed, because all these people had these expectations and memories of the meals I'd made, and like, oh my God,
I know, and sometimes when you're out of the kitchen for a little while, it's not that you can't cook anymore, but you're not as into the groove as you'd say. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah, yeah,
It's
that's it,
it's like training.
yeah. I mean, I had to memorize. There were, we had quite a few dishes in our menu which we had for like 20 years because people just loved it. And we would have people come in the restaurant. I look at them. I already know what you're having, and so there were quite a few dishes which just were our signature, and we could never take them off. And so I did a
Right.
couple of these things for the yacht club thing, but I said, like, how did I used to make that? Because like, I mean, for 27 years, I just threw stuff in the pot, and
Of
all à la
course.
minute.
Yep.
God knows, like, suddenly I have to do it for 45 people. Like, oh my God, how
Yeah.
how much garlic do I need and all this stuff? So it's
It
kind of
it
kind of
tasted
stressful.
like Roland's cooking, and that's how you did it. I get it.
Yeah,
No, 100%. Yeah, no, sure. And even if you do a recipe though, Roland, and you give it to someone, it won't taste the same as yours, and it's the little things.
yeah,
And that's not pretentious, it's just the
yeah,
truth. It's
yeah.
just, it's just the way you cook.
Or they think, oh, I can do a little this or a little that less, and before you know,
Yeah.
it's different.
Totally, it changes very quickly, and it could be, if you're caramelizing something, the length of that, little things.
Yeah,
It's really and sometimes equipment changes things too. I
oh,
mean,
yeah,
I've done events in the oven, if it's convection or not. I mean, these are little. little micro things, but it makes a big difference, especially in finishing a dish. So, I'm gonna ask you one last question. If you had any advice for people starting out in the culinary business, what would it be besides find something else? I'm kidding.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess before, if somebody says, "Okay, I'm really interested in that," before I would say that you should go to school, I would
Mm,
definitely tell them, ask some restaurant person or restaurant if I can go and work in the kitchen for 2 or 3 days or whatever, or a hotel or something like that, and really see, as you mentioned before, it's all nice and good if you watch that on TV. It's a total different cup of tea in the real world. And see, can you take the heat and the stress and
not take
all
things
that kind of
personally
stuff. And
because yeah,
for a while it's not very glamorous,
sure,
and it takes a while to. And don't think that in just because you went to culinary school for 2 years that you're going to be the executive chef in a five-star hotel. But all these
exactly.
things, I think you can only find out really if you go and just job shadow somewhere for a while and see, if anything like the heat, anything, the stress, the hours, and all that stuff. Is that something? Can I really do that before
Well,
you
I always
find out?
say picture every single vacation, holiday that you have with friends and family and realize you're probably gonna be working it, and that's really, it's not far from the truth. It's getting a little better. I know some people now who own restaurants will actually close down for 2 or 3 weeks so that
Right?
people
Yeah.
can get their time in. I get a friend of mine, Rob, who, runs a nice Mediterranean place in Toronto, and he just shut down for 2 weeks. Part of that is renovations, and part of it, he and his wife went to Europe.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, you have to make time for yourself in this business because the lists will never get finished, and that's
Yeah.
just the way it is. There's
Yeah.
always something
Yeah.
to do.
But
Well,
it's good
listen,
for somebody to actually go in the real world and
yeah,
find
100%.
out what it is. It's not just on TV, and it's not
No,
everybody's cup of tea to do that. That's fine. That's okay. But you
it's
don't want to go to school and then find out. And even if you go to school, it's still different than if you're going to be in the restaurant and
oh, yeah.
stuff flying around and whatever, all that good things.
100%. I've had friends, daughters and sons shadow me on more than one occasion. They're surprised with how long the days can be sometimes, and that's just the way it is. You don't stop till it's done, and so yeah, it is great advice. Chef Roland, thank you very much for taking your time today. Time is valuable to everyone. I value that above everything else. So thank you very much
It was my
for
pleasure.
coming on and sharing. And it was good to catch up again. I know
Yes,
we
yeah, we
chat a
hadn't
little
seen
bit
each other for some
online
time.
a long time. One last thing for people listening, Roland was a chef, a judge for my very first competition, culinary competition when I was an apprentice, and I like to say I didn't win it so much as I didn't make as many mistakes as the other people, and that's because looking back at those dishes that we all did, I was like, we all needed a bit of work. It was like I didn't succeed so much as I just didn't fail as much. Well, listen, thanks again, Roland, and enjoy the
Welcome.
rest of your day, and hopefully I'll talk to you sooner than later.
Thank you. Nice to chat with you.
Thanks, yeah. Take care. And that's it for another week on the Backstage Kitchen. As we close out this episode, Chef Roland is a reminder that strong kitchens are built on fundamentals, mentorship, and standards that don't change just because the industry does. If you'd like this episode, make sure to follow the podcast, share it with someone in the food world, and leave a review. It helps more than you think. I'm on Instagram at _backstage_kitchen or at Chef Live. Next week, I'll be stepping away from the guest chair for a special Christmas solo episode where I'll share some personal stories, holiday traditions, and reflections from a year spent behind the scenes. I'm Richard Julien, and this has been the Backstage Kitchen Podcast.